Blake walked into the situation thinking she had the upper hand, and now everyone's just sitting back like, wait, how did this flip so fast? Because listen, what's happening between Blake Lively and Justinbaldoni right now is not just messy, it's the kind of Hollywood drama where every little move starts coming back to bite you. So, here's where it gets crazy. Out of 13 claims Blake Lively brought forward, 10 are already gone just like that. Especially the ones everyone thought were the strongest, the sexual harassment claims, completely thrown out, gone. And now what's left is basically a trimmed-down version of what she originally tried to build, with only a few things still standing like retaliation and some contract-related issues heading into trial. And you know what really has people talking? The way this whole thing started unraveling, because apparently one of the biggest problems for Blake Lively wasn't even something Justinbaldoni did. It was something Blake Lively herself wrote. That letter, yeah, the one she sent to the Producers Guild trying to secure a producer credit on the film. Now, imagine this, Blake Lively sits down and lists out, get this, 70 different bullet points explaining everything she contributed to the project beyond acting. 70, not 10, not 20, 70. And at first glance you'd think that makes her look powerful, involved, important, but in court, music, that same letter basically turned into evidence against her. Because the judge looked at that and said, hold on, if Blake Lively had this much control, if she was making these many decisions, then she's not just an employee being directed, she's operating like an independent contractor. And that one distinction, it changes everything. Suddenly, the entire foundation of those harassment claims starts falling apart because those laws apply differently depending on that exact classification. And that's where people started side-eyeing the situation hard, because Blake Lively essentially proved in her own words that she wasn't under Justinbaldoni's authority in the way she claimed later. It's like she built the case and then accidentally dismantled it herself. Now, add another layer to this. The legal strategy, or honestly what people are calling a lack of one. Because somehow Blake Lively's team based major parts of her claims on California law when the events in question happened in New Jersey. Like, how does that even happen at this level? This isn't some small case. This is high-profile, high-stakes, millions on the line type of situation. And the judge didn't even need to get into the deeper arguments. He just looked at the technical side and said, this law doesn't apply here. Case dismissed on those points, which is brutal because it means those claims didn't even get tested fully. They were shut down before they could even breathe. And now people are whispering the same thing everywhere. Blake Lively might have bigger issues with her own legal team than she does with Justinbaldoni. Because if your lawyers miss something that basic, that's not just a small mistake, that's the kind of thing that changes the entire outcome of your case. Meanwhile, Blake Lively's side is still trying to control the narrative. She's saying this was always about retaliation, that the core of her case is still alive, that she's finally going to get to tell her full story in court. But let's be real for a second, that sounds like damage control, because earlier the focus was very clearly on those harassment claims. And now that they're gone, the story is shifting, and it's not subtle either. Blake Lively is now framing herself as someone speaking up, not just for herself but for others, talking about creating safer workplaces, standing up against systems. All of that. And look, that sounds powerful on the surface, but people are also questioning it. Because when you make serious allegations like the ones her team described about explicit behavior, inappropriate conversations, all of that, you need people to back it up. You need witnesses, you need proof, you need more than just statements. And that's the part everyone's waiting on now, because if those claims were that serious, then someone else had to see something, someone else had to hear something. And if nobody shows up to support that version of events, then things get even more complicated for Blake Lively moving forward. Blake Lively keeps pushing this idea that the heart of her case is still alive, but the energy around it has definitely shifted. You can feel it, because now it's less about what Blake Lively originally accused Justinbaldoni of, and more about whether Blake Lively can actually prove any of it in a courtroom setting. And those are two very different things. Think about what Blake Lively's own legal team said earlier. They described situations where Justinbaldoni allegedly spoke openly about sexual topics at work, described his body, even made comments about non-consensual situations. Those are not small accusations. Those are explosive. And when you say things like that publicly, especially through lawyers, it sets a very high bar, because now the expectation is simple. You bring people in who can confirm it. And this is where the pressure is really starting to build around Blakelively. Because if those incidents actually happened the way they were described, then there should be multiple people willing to come forward and say, yes, I saw that, or yes, I heard that, especially on a film set where we read it 920 words. There are always dozens of people around, actors, crew members, assistants, producers. It's not like these are private, one-on-one environments all the time. So now everyone's quietly asking the same question. Where are those people? Blakelively even mentioned other actors from the film like Jenny Slate and Isabella Ferreira, indirectly tying them into this narrative of a workplace where concerns were raised. But so far there hasn't been any strong public support from those names backing Blakelively's version of events, and that silence is loud. In Hollywood, silence always says something. And then there's Blakelively's statement after the ruling, which honestly feels like a full pivot. Blakelively comes out saying she's grateful because now the core of her case can move forward, that she's ready to tell her story not just for herself, but for others who don't have her platform. And you can see what she's trying to do there. She's reframing the entire situation into something bigger, something almost symbolic, but people aren't just buying it without questioning it. Because the timing of that shift matters. When the biggest claims fall apart, and suddenly the narrative becomes this was never about that anyway, it starts to feel like Blakelively is trying to reshape the story after losing key parts of it. And then she leans even further into that role, talking about how she didn't want a lawsuit, how she was forced into this because of retaliation, how she's standing up against systems that silence people. It's very dramatic, very positioned. Blakelively is clearly trying to take control of the perception here, not just the case. But here's the thing, perception only goes so far when there's an actual trial coming up. Because while Blakelively is making statements, Justinbaldoni's team is doing something very different. They're staying focused on evidence. From the beginning, Justinbaldoni's side came out strong with receipts, texts, documents, timelines. They even put together a massive collection of communication that painted their own version of what really happened behind the scenes. And whether people like it or not, that kind of preparation makes a difference. It sets the tone. It makes it look like Justinbaldoni was ready for this fight from day one. Even when their counter-lawsuit didn't fully hold up, it still sent a message. It showed that Justinbaldoni wasn't just going to sit back and absorb the accusations quietly, he was going to push back aggressively and put everything on the table. So now the dynamic between Blakelively and Justinbaldoni feels completely different from where it started. At first it looked like Blakelively had momentum, like she was driving the narrative, but after the court decisions, that momentum has slowed down a lot. Now it feels like both sides are heading into trial on uneven ground. Blakelively still has claims, yes, but they're narrower, more focused, and under a lot more scrutiny. Meanwhile, Justinbaldoni's team looks confident, almost comfortable, like they've already survived the worst part and now they're just preparing to close it out. And the biggest shift, public perception, is no longer clear-cut, it's divided. Some people still believe Blakelively is standing up for something real. Others think Blakelively overplayed her hand and is now trying to recover from it. Either way, everything now comes down to what happens when this actually reaches a jury, because that's where stories stop mattering and proof takes over. Blakelively is now walking into this next phase with way less room to maneuver, and you can feel how tight things have become around her, because once you strip away those 10 dismissed claims, what's left isn't this massive, overwhelming case anymore. It's a much narrower fight, and in a courtroom, narrower means sharper. There's nowhere to hide. So now all eyes are on what Blakelively actually brings into that courtroom. Not statements, not interviews, not positioning, actual proof. Because the moment she sits in front of a jury, everything she said gets tested in real time, every detail, every timeline, every accusation. And if anything doesn't line up perfectly, it's going to get picked apart immediately. And let's be honest for a second, juries don't just look at what happened, they look at how it happened. They look at behavior, consistency, credibility. They notice when someone shifts their narrative, they notice when something feels exaggerated or unclear. So Blakelively isn't just defending her claims anymore, she's defending her entire credibility. At the same time, Justinbaldoni is stepping into this with a very different kind of pressure. Because for him, it's about dismantling what's left. His team already knocked out the biggest claims early. Now their job is simple: weaken the rest until there's nothing substantial left for a jury to hold on to. And the way they've been moving so far, it's calculated, quiet, but calculated. They're not over-talking, they're not over-explaining. They're just pointing to inconsistencies, leaning on documentation, and letting Blake Lively's own words do a lot of the work for them.
That
strategy, it tends to play very well in court. Now, here's where it gets really interesting because outside the legal arguments, there's a bigger unspoken layer to all of this. Reputation. Not just Blake Lively's reputation, but Justinbaldoni's, too. This isn't one of those cases where only one person walks away affected. Both of them are being judged publicly and privately at the same time. For Blake Lively, the risk is obvious. If the jury doesn't believe her, or if her claims don't hold up, it's not just a legal loss, it's a credibility hit that follows her everywhere, every future project, every interview, every public appearance. People will always remember this moment and question it. But for Justinbaldoni, it's different. Even though he's already seen some of those major accusations dismissed, the shadow of those claims doesn't just disappear overnight. Allegations like that stick in people's minds even when they're not proven. So, for him, this trial is about clearing that shadow completely. It's about walking out of that courtroom with no doubt left hanging over him. And this is why the upcoming trial date feels so intense, because it's not just about legal wins or losses anymore. It's about who people believe when everything is laid out in front of them. Blake Lively is trying to position herself as someone who stood up, someone who spoke out, someone who used her platform for something bigger. Justinbaldoni is positioning himself as someone who is falsely accused and is now proving it piece by piece. Two completely different narratives, both heading toward the same jury. And the truth is, juries don't care about narratives the way the public does. They care about clarity, they care about consistency, they care about what can actually be shown, not just said. So, when this finally plays out, it's going to come down to very simple questions. Did Blake Lively experience what she claimed she experienced? Can she prove it clearly and convincingly? And can Justinbaldoni create enough doubt around those claims to make the jury hesitate? Because hesitation is everything in a case like this. And if you look at where things stand right now, Blake Lively is the one who has more to prove. That's just the reality. She came in with a much bigger set of accusations, and most of them didn't survive. So, now what's left has to carry all the weight, and that's not easy. So when people say this is still wide open, they're not wrong, but it's not wide open the way it used to be. It's now a focused, high-pressure situation where every move matters, every word matters, and every piece of evidence. And once that courtroom door closes and the jury starts listening, there's no more spin, no more reshaping the story, no more public statements to soften the impact. At that point, it's just Blake Lively, Justinbaldoni, and the truth as it can be proven. And that's where everything finally